Fresh and Buds.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Fresh and Buds. I'm your host, Tommy Fresh, and you are all my buds. And I am joined by a bud today, Mr. Adam Filipchuk. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Glad to get the other half of the Combat Chain podcast on the show. We had Mr. Patrick Shaw, aka Patty No Rails. He's been going off in many different discords I've seen. He's always he's always chatting and going off the rails. We love it, and I'm happy to have you on this episode of Fresh and Buds, episode 36. But before we get into anything, I want to say that the show is brought to you by the brand new Fresh and Buds Patreon, which I mentioned last week. We have all kinds of fun things. I did record my first bonus ep, the Freshie, on there. I was just kind of talking to myself with some jazz playing in the background. So if you're into that, check it out. And, if you can afford it, awesome. If not, that is cool too. Everything is still free on this side. And we're with Adam, and I feel like a nice way to start the show is going to be to do a quick crack-a-pack with our favorite supplemental set, Everfest. What are your overall thoughts on Everfest, Adam?
There's a few cards in Everfest that are pushed for sure. Mm-hmm. Revel and Runeblood being one of them. And Viserai certainly got a lot stronger. It definitely, I think Everfest was a set where they were like, let's throw a bunch of passes at the wall, see what sticks. This is a good litmus test for the future of the game. But I know a lot of people have said like Everfest was a flop or something like that, and I don't think so. Like, we got some cool mechanics, we got some cool cards. It was just it'll just be like, it'll just be remembered as one of those experimental pushing the boundary sets, I think, and I think that's fine.
Yeah, I'll agree. Unfortunately, it'll probably be remembered as the Starvo set, as we get further down
That's
the
true.
line. But there are going to be some cards I think that will be pretty prevalent as the game progresses. But and then they tried some stuff with the items and stuff. So with that said, we'll get into this crack pack. That nice paper sound. Here's a card, which is pretty relevant to our Blitz topic that we're going to be getting into later. Outland Skirmish. This is a card that's seeing play in Kasai.
Yes, it is.
Kasai did not have the conversion rates that it hoped this past weekend in Krakow.
I don't feel like Kasai is quite as good as people think she is. Like, Kasai is good, don't get me wrong, and she's still like tier A probably. Like, she's up there, but she's not. Or tier. I don't. Everybody always like changes up the way the tier system works. I never remember, was it tier S, tier 1, tier whatever. Like just below the top. Like, Kasai is like so close to being one of the best decks, but the coppers, I think, are just a little too slow for where our meta is at right now, and there's just, you can get killed before you can get your turn off. And yeah, if things get dealt with though, on May 2nd, Kasai could for sure be up there on one of the best decks.
Yeah, and Outland Skirmish certainly helped that deck. Next we have Macho Grande. This is the red one. I don't think we're really seeing Macho Grande see any play outside of the blue one in some cases. I think, I guess probably a fine budget and commoner option, which commoner is now going to be a pretty, I guess, supported format. Next is Twin Twisters. Yeah. This is a card that nobody's really looking at. This was just like tap, but not as good.
I don't even remember what Twin Twister does. I have to look it up.
Here, I'll tell you. It's one. Well, this is the yellow. It's 1 for 2 attack
I
with 2 defense. When this hits, or you can choose one. When it hits, your next attack this combat chain gets +1, or it just gets +1. And it has go again. I guess the red one's the only one really playable.
Yeah, this is like a weird. It could be like Bittering Thorns, like a more modal Bittering Thorns, or yeah, it's okay. I think in Commoner, once again, you could maybe consider this.
Definitely. Yeah, it is interesting now opening these packs, kind of considering what will be good in Commoner. What are your thoughts on Commoner?
I'm so excited for Commoner. It's the one of the breaths of fresh air that we needed, and I've been. And unfortunately, I don't get out to as many locals now as I used to because I'm just busy doing other, content things or playtesting or things like that. But I actually want to go to locals again now because of Commoner, and I wanna go play grindy matches. I feel like Commoner is going to be what our crew meta Blitz used to be.
Oh, okay.
I miss crew meta. I miss the crew meta for Blitz so much. That was so much fun, and I think Commoner. My hope is Commoner will be that.
I have a feeling it will be the same. I'm sure there will have to be some kind of bans. Like I know like Seeds and like Lightning,
I
Ball
think
Lightning
Seeds needs to go.
yeah, both of
Ball
those.
Lightning might be okay
Yeah.
without Sting of Sorcery.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. But yeah, we will see. I mean, both those cards will certainly speed up that format, but it is very exciting to see where we get to with that. Next is Wild Ride. The red one sees play, and that's it's not stellar for the brutes, but it's the red one's I guess good enough for some of the hyper aggro brute decks.
Yeah,
Yeah, but nothing. I mean, I don't know. It feels so weird to have cards that can't block in your deck right now.
I mean, yeah. But to the on the flip side though, is there an argument that decks, the way the metas are right now, decks don't want to block, and maybe Wild Ride can help enable those big damage turns?
True. That is a good point. That is a good point. I mean, yeah, I guess we don't really want to block right now, but it's so hard to like, um, uh, return that damage output, and I guess Wild Ride does help that. If your flips are good, right?
Yeah,
Um,
and that's the thing though, is there's an element of chance to it.
yeah, well, like all brutes. Next is Zoom In. This is the yellow one. I don't think this one's particularly great. I mean, the yellow one, 2 for 4, 3 attack or 3 defense. Has boosts, and when you attack with it, opt X, where X is the number of times you've boosted.
This could be okay in like just a big all-out boost deck, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't think big all-out boost is where anybody wants to be right now.
No, maybe a little bit in Blitz, I guess, but
You know
outside
what?
of that,
I did in Blitz. I did for my last skirmish sleeve up Data Doll,
oh,
and
how'd that go?
yeah, I went 1-3.
Okay, to be expected.
You know what, the list I was on was a little bit slower than my local meta is, and if I had been tuned into that and like sped up the deck a bit, I actually think it could have been okay.
Mm-hmm.
However, it is a fun deck to play, and that's just where I don't actually see it. Has nothing to do with Zoom In, and I don't know why I brought it up at this
Well,
particular moment. But we were
yeah,
talking about Max, and it came to mind.
yeah.
uh, but yeah, no, it it was a fun deck. It pukes out items, and you develop these ridiculous boards. It's you think like Dash or Prism can have incredible boards. Like nah, like Data Doll can develop some weird boards. You're like, I'm gonna activate this, then I'm gonna activate this, and I'm gonna take counters off this, then I'm gonna activate this, and then I'm gonna boost a card, and then I'm gonna Tekla Foundry Heart. Oh, look at that! I banished 2 more items. Those are gonna go on the board. I'm gonna activate them. It's
Oh my
ridiculous.
god. Yeah, I know some guys in the Discord had built some stuff, and I'm interested to see how it plays out because I remember playing against some Data Doll prior to Everfest, and it was just it was like sad. But obviously has a lot more play now, for sure.
Yeah, microprocessor really enables a lot of play patterns for it.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Next we have Quicken, a card that we're always happy to see on the field. We're gonna skip past that one. Read the Glide Path. This is a 0 Ranger action, 2 defense. Your next arrow attack gains +1, opt 1, go again. I guess the red one's pretty decent in like some like go tall Ranger decks, but also Ranger decks aren't really that great right
With
now.
the opting, I feel like if anything, I feel like Azalea is the one that wants to be playing this deck
Mm-hmm.
or this card, if it's going to see a play. But that's
That's a big
my
if.
uneducated Ranger opinion. Like I'm not a Ranger player. I don't. That's my
Yeah.
guess. I'm grasping at straws here.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree. I think Azalea. The foil is another Outland Skirmish, so put that off to the side. We have our first rare Amulet of Haven Call. This is the one that goes and gets Rally the Rear Guard. What a weird card. Not exactly something, in my opinion, that's very playable.
If this card didn't have the clause on it where you can only activate it if you have no cards in hand, then Amulet of Haven Call would be busted. Like being able to, as a defense reaction, go get a Rally the Rear Guard and then pump it to 5 defense. Like that's for what, 1 card out of hand.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
huge. But the clause that you can't do it if you've got cards in hand. I haven't figured out a way to abuse it yet, and I don't. Well, I guess if you could have resources floating, have like, I don't know, what's a card in our like No, if you had like is cash an instant or an action? I don't know. I'm grasping at straws here. I don't know how you can abuse this.
Yeah, I think we're probably waiting for PVE for this bad boy. I think
Maybe that I could see that. Yeah, all these items and amulets and potions and whatever are going to be really cool once we get PVE.
Yeah, absolutely. Where like you don't really have to worry as much about having some kind of off turn, setting something up, and then the final rare is Thunderquake Blue, which is more than playable.
Yep, that one sees lots of play.
Yeah, and no majestic or anything cool, unfortunately, but all goes into the pile anyway. But that is our pack of Everfest, the most wonderful supplemental set we've ever had in 2022. Now, let's get to you, Adam. I want to dig a little bit into your Flesh and Blood journey. First of all, what were your card game, TCG, CCG experiences prior to Flesh and Blood?
So, I did come from Magic. Like the transition from Flesh and Blood is directly from Magic, but prior to Magic, it's kind of weird. Growing up, I always knew about Magic, and there was always that kind of curiosity. Every once in a while, I would somehow find I would end up with a couple Magic cards in my possession. I never really know where they would come from, and I would always try to figure out how to play the game, but I never had. I didn't have the wherewithal to think, oh, I should Google it or something like that. And it never really went anywhere. I did dabble a bit in Pokemon. I had some first edition Pokemon cards when I was young that those I wish I knew where they ended up because
yeah, don't we all?
yeah. 100%. And then I dabbled a little bit in Yu-Gi-Oh! When that first came out as well. And then once again, I had some pretty cool Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards that I'm sure would be worth a ton nowadays, and I don't know where those ended up either. But then from my childhood to because that was all during my childhood. Fast forward, I didn't really look at TCGs or anything up until my mid-20s when I picked up The Witcher and I started playing Gwent.
Oh, okay.
And I actually had more fun playing the in-game Gwent than I had playing the actual Witcher. So that then transitioned me to start thinking, well, how can I get more of this? And I that's when I properly found Magic. I started downloading, like, because we've got smartphones and those things by this point. So I start downloading apps and playing what was the Magic. There was a
like
Magic app at the time,
Duel for the
Duels or something like
Planeswalkers,
that.
maybe. Yeah.
Something like that, yeah. And I played a lot of that, but I never at that point I never like went to an FNM or anything like that. And for maybe about 6 months of really dabbling with Magic, I kind of fell out of it again.
Mm-hmm.
And then fast forward, I didn't proper find Magic again till 2020.
Oh wow.
And so Flesh and Blood's already out at this point, or maybe it was late 2019. And of course, Flesh and Blood's already out at this point. And now I'm really starting to digest Magic, and I'm like, I'm learning about the pro scene, and I'm trying to like digest strategy, and I'm starting to dabble with like buying and selling. And it was through the buying and selling side that I found Flesh and Blood when Channel Fireball first announced their partnership with LSS. That was when I'd seen the name Flesh and Blood in a few blogs up until that point, and I was like, oh, that's probably something I should get to know at some point. But there was never really any draw to it. But then when LSS partnered up with CFB, and I was doing the buying and selling and stuff, I was like, okay, if this game is big enough that CFB's picking it up, I need to know what this is for buying and selling purposes. And I started to look into getting some. I ordered some Flesh and Blood. I think November of 2020 we ended up getting the hard North American launch, or at least we in Canada here. We got our local store started. One of our locals started to sell it, and I got a few boxes. It was actually really cool. Pulled a heart in my first box, and that was
nice.
a really special moment.
That's awesome.
And
that's a
sign. Of course I sold it. Yeah. and regretted that, but then managed. Actually, you know what? Not. I shouldn't say I regretted that, because I managed to sell it for 600 Canadian, and then I ended up buying another heart for 200 Canadian. So if anything, wow. I came out ahead there.
Yeah.
I digress. Through buying and selling, through the investment side, that's how I ended up with my first Flesh and Blood in hand. But then, of course, the gamer in me wanted to try the gameplay. I started playing with the girlfriend, and that's where I really started to fall in love with it. Was like, we were in the middle of the pandemic, so I never thought to like try to check Discord right away or see if what options were there to play online. Like at first, webcam gameplay never crossed my mind, so I was just playing on kitchen table and reading a bunch of articles and strategy stuff, because I wanted to learn more about the game, and I kept seeing like teasers for the pro scene, and I'm like, oh, this sounds like it's going to be really fun. And I didn't end up finding the online community though proper until February of 2021, when Channel Fireball once again announced that skirmish season was going to be going online, and they gave a whole primer on how to go online. And through that, I was like, oh, I can play Flesh and Blood at home and still participate in events, and I don't have to wait on my local LGS to start running events once the pandemic is permitting and stuff like that. And that's when I found at first I found the Canadian Discord, and then I found the global Discord, the Flesh and Blood community or whatever that I think a lot of us are in, and it just started to grow from there. That's really when I started to meet everyone, and it was a weird, or
Yeah. Oh no, I mean, it sounds to me like, we both have similar journeys, Magic, and then I played a lot of Magic, but but it's interesting that you said you didn't even think about webcam like play. I don't think until now I realized that there was a point where I wasn't even thinking about webcam play, even like before Flesh and Blood, like in the beginning of the pandemic, before I'd even gotten into it. I didn't even think about that for Magic. I mean, Magic had an online client, so it was a little bit different, but it is crazy that, like, neither of us were like, oh yeah, we just point this thing down and, and start playing.
Yeah. I think that was a light bulb moment for a lot of people, where they're like, oh yeah, I can play at home. This is so easy. And even at this point, like I really don't mind playing on webcam at this point. Like I've got my nice little setup, and I've got my nice monitor in front of me, and as long as somebody else has put in the time to make their setup as good as mine is, it's a pleasant experience. Like, sadly,
Absolutely.
there's to play Flesh and Blood. There's still no reason to leave the house ever.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, until unless you want to be a pro and go to those big events, but
Yeah,
it is incredible, and also it's kind of like they named it Flesh and Blood because they want people like in person, which is a beautiful thing. I think playing in person,
yes,
with real cards is amazing. But then like it was able to survive a global pandemic by people playing with webcams, and then soon after some tabletop simulator. Now let's get into a new segment I like to call the Fresh Faves. I'm going to ask you 3 questions about Flesh and Blood. You're going to tell me your favorite of each of these. The first one is, who's your favorite hero?
I I struggled to pin it down to just one. I can easily pin it down to like 2 or 3, and Katsu is right up there because he's the first hero I started playing when I was playing on the kitchen table with the girlfriend, and she was on Dorinthia, I was on Katsu. I played a ton of matches, and yeah, Katsu is always going to be near and dear to my heart because of that. But due to like play style and aesthetic and things like that, I'm very attracted to the heroes like Prism, where you can develop these elaborate plans and do things at instant speed and play around with your opponent, and
Mm.
those are the kind of games that I really like to play. So,
Yeah,
and
well,
then
Prism is certainly elaborate, and I've talked about my hate of Prism on the show, but no, I mean, it is kind of interesting. Prism, is a lot of Magic players' favorite uh, hero because you kind of build a board state, which is not really a thing in most of the heroes' game plans.
yeah, but at the same time, she's also like, she does build a board. She's kind of funny because she's a lot like Magic in that sense, like,
Mm-hmm.
but her board state, like trying to develop shields and all that, is very, in my opinion, like I would think that as like a green deck that's like, I don't know, like green elves or something like that. Like
Yeah.
that's that's what Prism's board state looks like. But then Prism's play style is more like blue red spells. Like, is it
Yeah, yeah.
sorceries and instants? Like, it's a combination of those things at the same time, and it's really interesting in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what is your favorite weapon?
Favorite weapon from, oh, I think the Kodachis, actually. The Kodachis are so cool because they, in the early game, they're just like that little bit of chip damage, in that they set up mask, and they play so much into how you can play around with your opponent once again. But then in the late game, like people are always like, throughout most of the game, like, yeah, 1 damage, I'll take 1. But then at the end game, it's like now they're down to 1, and that 1 becomes so scary, and now they have to, the Kodachis are such a modal weapon, and they're so useful in so many situations.
Yeah, they really can, like, based on how they're designed, it's either aggro or control in the way, and that's
Yeah,
that's it's really really neat. Now, what is your favorite non-hero non-weapon card?
this is a hard one to answer because I I appreciate cards for their interactions and what they do with other cards.
Hmm.
And so, like,
If you want to pick 2, I'll let you pick 2. This is my
ooh, okay.
podcast, my rules.
Oh, okay. 2 cards then.
If that makes it easier. If not, don't worry about it.
I feel like I can't cop out here though. I need to give you something.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Um, okay, yeah, you know what? It's kind of funny because if you'd asked me this question maybe a month or 2 ago, or a lot closer to Everfest coming out, I actually probably would have told you it was Revel. For a while there, I was having so much fun playing Revel, and like you could enable the craziest things off of it. And then I started to clue into just how busted it is, and like it's busted to the point where it creates unfun play patterns for your opponent. And now I'm like actually like really bitter towards it because it's too pushed. So
Yeah, I feel
in,
that.
in a weird way, yeah, like that was my favorite card for a minute there, and then now that one's quite out of contention. Um, but beyond that, I actually do struggle to come up with one right now because for me, like I feel like a lot of cards are on the chopping block. Like a lot of the cool
Mm-hmm.
fun cards are on the Scalata's on the chopping block, Sonata's potentially on the chopping block. Cards that even though they are starting to create unfun play patterns for the opponent, they are in themselves fun to play with, and you can
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of fun creating these really elaborate turns. So I'm almost in this like mode where I'm like shutting myself off emotionally, and I'm trying to not let myself be hurt by losing a card.
um,
So
all right. I
yeah,
mean, I'll give you mine. How's that?
yeah.
It'll always be Reckless Swing because I don't know.
Oh,
Which is not a fun card for my opponents ever. But you know what? Like you're playing against Brute. If you're willingly going to two, you're putting yourself at risk, and you know that. So,
I have two very bitter memories where I was like in like semifinals. Yeah, both times actually. I was in semifinals for like skirmish or like were you ever? Do you know about do you remember the Fab Gauntlet that Brandon
no,
Patrick
no,
used to run?
no, I don't.
That was another. At some point, it went through like many different moments of popularity, but like at its highest, like it was seeing like 60 people show up and like people were tuning in to watch it like be streamed, and it was doing quite well. But I went to the semifinals in one where I had an opportunity to block and go to three instead of going to two just by throwing my tunic in front of the block. And I was like, no, I want to save my tunic. And I don't know why I thought like this is gonna haunt me for the rest of my life. Like I wake up in the night in cold sweats and I'm like, the tunic, why didn't I use the tunic? Uh, and it, you know
And they
what? It was
got
such a
you.
good learning moment, though. Yeah, they
Yeah,
got me with the reckless swing. I
yeah,
tried
yeah,
to.
yeah.
I had them too, and they got me with the rest of it. Ugh.
uh, I mean, here's the thing with Reckless Swing and like Shunt, right? Uh, good players let that happen once, or I mean, within their control, right? And you learned there, and and now whenever you see Reinar Levia sitting across from you, you're gonna keep that in mind. So, kind of fun.
That's one of the first things I always think. Can't go to two this match.
Yeah, can't go to two. Though it is funny against like Warrior. Like I'll be like, oh, can't go to one. I'll go to two, and then they double shunt me, and I'm like, okay, things are great. I love my life. It's amazing. Now,
There's a guy in my local meta who tries to set up the double reckless swing sometimes, and
oh
oh,
wow, greedy. That is so greedy, and I love it. Um, Now, when we had your cohort Pat on, we got there. We got a little bit about the Combat Chain podcast. Can you tell us about what started the podcast and how it has evolved since you've been with them or with it from the beginning? It's your podcast.
yeah. And so to go back to my journey to getting into Flesh and Blood, when I was doing buying and selling, I was starting to look at doing magic content as well.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, though, I did not have the confidence. I was fairly new to the game. When I would I would see some of the grade A quality content that was coming out, and I was just like, I can't do this yet. I'm not ready for this yet. So fast forward, I find Flesh and Blood. Immediately, I'm thinking, I want to do something with this. This is still new. There's an opportunity here. Screw magic. I want to do something with this. So pretty much right since skirmish season one and everybody went online, I was already like the people I was meeting on Discord. I was having conversations with them, trying to like find people to start doing like a podcast was kind of what I was thinking I wanted to do. I've got the audio engineering background. I've got a studio set up at home. It's really easy for me to make the good sounding. Well, it's easy for anyone to make good sounding audio these days.
Mm-hmm.
You can buy a studio in a box. I was still struggling with. Side note: I'm a huge advocate for mental health, and that's gonna come through in this next part here. I was struggling a lot with the confidence to do something like that. There was once again just because Channel Fireball was already doing grade A content. They had a few writers doing really cool stuff for them. And the Session Blood guys were doing really good stuff, and it was kind of like, okay, how do I try to measure up to that? Because I want, when I do something, I want to do something good. So I finally, in August, I met a guy in my local. His name is Andrew Palesky, a great player. He's actually coming to the Pro Tour with me. He was able to. We had two here in Canada. We have provinces instead of states, and believe it or not, we actually don't live in igloos.
What? Oh my God!
and we don't get around by mooseback. No. Yeah. So he in our province, we had two pro quests. I won one. He won the other one. So. Him and I immediately, like, he was the one who started coming to me about like, hey, we should do videos, we should be doing something. And so him and I, from like August to November, we were really bouncing back and forth trying to figure out exactly what and how it would start. And it was finally in November, he just came over one day and we're just like, all right, we're going to make this happen today. And we ended up setting up some mics, and we just went for it, and we came out with the first episode of the Combat Chain, and then we just didn't look back. He then brought in, at the time, Jeff Horan, who is another really good buddy of his. Jeff Horan and I have since become good friends, and the three of us were doing it for, I think, up until January, and then just Jeff and Andrew kind of both. Andrew is busy with school, Jeff's busy with his career, and they're kind of like, you know what, this content creation thing is a little bit more than I expected it to be, and I'm struggling to manage it alongside the other things I'm trying to do right now. And so we had just a heart to heart, and we kind of all agreed that, you know what, there was no hard feelings. They had other things they wanted to focus on. I understood, and I knew that I still wanted the Combat Chain to keep growing. I see so much potential for anybody who wants to get in on the ground floor of Flesh and Blood still. There's a lot of potential to really do that.
Absolutely.
And I encourage anybody to do it. So at the time, I just started putting feelers out there, and Pat hooked on right away, and he's like, you know what, I've been wanting to take that jump with you. Not with me specific. He said he wanted to take that leap as well, start investing into that, and the rest was history from there. And then that's, I think, I'm sure he kind of covered the rest from there on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I gotta say, both of you really play well with each other, and it seems like it just seems like good and a positive place and useful as well for a lot of players, what you guys are doing over there. And you know what, honestly, I think you just gave Pat a platform for him to just go off, right? I think he wanted to talk so bad, and that's like why I started my podcast. Is like, I gotta talk to somebody about this stuff because I'm thinking about it all the time, But to speak to the confidence thing, and mental health and stuff like that. It is tough, man. Because I was in a similar boat in terms of I was just like, I'm just gonna start this, but it takes a little bit to get the confidence, and I do, if anybody's out there listening who ever wants to start doing content, the confidence will come because it just takes that first couple negative comments, and they suck and you hate them, and then after that you kind of built that callus, and as long as you push through it, you're going to have that confidence. Like, well, it's so easy to pay attention to like negativity when like there is a ton of positivity coming in. Yeah, I mean, I get it. I get it with the confidence thing. It's tough. It's very tough because we're putting our whole being into this thing, and Not everybody understands that. So, what would be your elevator pitch for the podcast to like opponents who maybe haven't listened to it? Like whenever I sit down across from an opponent, I like to just let them know I have a podcast and yeah. What would be your elevator pitch?
So I don't. My elevator pitch is based off kind of my vision for what I think the combat chain can be. And when I think about the true potential of the combat chain, I think about AM talk radio of all things.
Okay, cool.
I in a weird way, I grew up on AM talk radio. Like my dad and I would listen to like the radio hockey games, or I would fall asleep listening to old 1950s radio shows or things like that. But through like listening to AM talk radio, I just, there was something really comforting about just listening to conversational things, like people having conversations about whatever. They're on the weekends for our local AM talk radio station. They'll have like just the farmer report or the knitting show, and I don't actually listen to the farmer report or the knitting show or anything like that, but I appreciate that these are people who are really passionate and they're putting their hard work into what they're doing, and in turn they attract people who are equally passionate and want to learn, and they develop a community through that. And my pitch for the combat chain through that is that this is flesh and blood. This is your dad's AM talk radio show, flesh and blood. Like this is a conversational show. This is a show where we're just going to talk about opinions and ideas. And honestly, through that, like my hope is to actually take the combat chain at some point, once we have enough of a following, to a live format where we can do a weekly thing and have people, call in or message in, or like bring their questions. We can have a guest on live, and people can ask that guest questions in the moment, and we can have conversations and just get into the minutia and the details of topics and analyze things in ways that just a basic article or a basic pitch can't analyze. So a long tangent there. To sum it up, my pitch is it's a conversational podcast. It's a place where Pat and I are gonna take whatever news or whatever's going on, or we're going to grab a guest and talk about, have a conversation about whatever's going on in their life in flesh and blood right now, whether that be the pro scene or, I don't know, judging or we had Flake on recently, and he, we just had a conversation about what it was like to be in the booth for Indianapolis and just like things like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, you're speaking my language, my man. That is I mean, I would have been sold right away. And I'm hoping everybody that listens to me listens to you guys. I mean, you guys are awesome. So, you're also. I wanna jump into a little bit about you as a player now. You're quite the competitive player. You are qualified for the Pro Tour. What do the next few months look like for you? We all know that testing is a little weird right now.
Yeah. So for me, like skirmish, those things, when those kind of events started up, and those were all we really had, those were my big focus. And it was like, hey, when's the next skirmish? When's the next biggest event I can get into? Because I wanted, as I started to play Flesh and Blood, I just knew I wanted to play it more. And it kind of reminded me when I first found Magic, like back in late 2019, early 2020, and started to really digest it. It was the part that really attracted me was like high level competitive play.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember seeing I still don't understand why Wizards was trying to can their whole pro scene, because even like they had these pitches on their website where it was like, you could be the next pro, and they just did such a good job of like making you want to be a part of that. And you would see like videos of like guys like doing this incredible play, and the crowd goes crazy, and then he's lifting a trophy above his head, and there's streamers falling and smoke everywhere, and it just looked like so much fun. And then when Flesh and Blood started to roll out, and you would kind of at least like I would, all the articles I was reading, I caught wind of like what James White really wanted the pro scene to be. And at the same time, you know, you're hearing about the death of competitive Magic.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh man, James White gets it. He sees the esport potential in this game. And through that, that was where I fell in love then, was because I was like, this game remind so I guess this game reminds me of like the way my dad would appreciate hockey when I was growing up once again.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, he'd get together with his buddies and they would talk about little plays or different things like that. And it's like I started to see how Flesh and Blood could be that for me. And then through that and playing in skirmishes, it was always about, okay, I wanted to get to the next big event. And at this point now, those things are like Pro Tour and Worlds. So on my radar for the next few months, man, I've been good at going on tangents on this episode.
Hey, listen, I just like, you know, this is a safe space. You know, go on as many tangents as you want. I love it. I love it.
No, this is awesome. So at this point, like the events that are on the radar are things like Pro Tours, Worlds, things like that. We still don't know what the entire landscape of those events look like, because, you know, we know Pro Tour 1, we're getting that in, you know, May here, because we've known about that one for a bit, and then we kind of got the teaser about Pro Tour number 2
Mm-hmm.
in France, and we know we're getting World sometime in November. And then after, the nice thing is, at least after this year, we kind of start to know about what to expect moving forward, because, you know, with each year that goes by, uh, a pattern gets established. But at this point, you know, it's still kind of, yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this now. The
you,
next
you got New Jersey coming up, you know,
yeah,
to get you
yeah,
back on the
New
rail
Jersey,
here. It's
New
it's
Jersey,
exciting.
it is. And New Jersey and France, those are the two big events that I'm like, okay, for New Jersey, I need to find a way to be ready for that. I really want to get top 32, get that PTI, and then at least I've got that safety net for whatever event moving forward. If I back when we first started getting all the US callings, I actually kind of poo-pooed my ELO a little bit. And at the time, I ended up signing up for all the callings that were happening. But then through different limitations, I was only able to attend Vegas.
Mm.
And I ended up through that being 0-1 drops from Dallas, Cincinnati, and Orlando. So that dropped my ELO down quite a bit. And I'm in this position now where I need to fix my ELO. So I'm really looking forward to Jersey for that, with the 64K factor. If I can string together a day 2 qualification, that should help bump my ELO up a bit. It also looks like, and we haven't gotten any clarity on this, but it looks like our old RTNs and possibly ProQuests, I don't know, we might get ELO for those. So hopefully that'll fix my ELO a bit. But yeah, in Jersey, hoping to get that top 32, get that PTI safety net. And then after that, it's just the next main goal is qualifying for France. France happens to be one of my favorite places in the world. To get to go play in France at the pro scene, at a pro level, that to me is incredible. And yeah, that's the next little bit here.
Yeah, well, we're all rooting for you. Well, I guess so. I mean, we are getting an announcement on May 3rd, right? For banned and restricted. Do you have any predictions for CC? For what's going to happen there? I mean, right now, Starvo did win the Battle Hardened in Krakow, so, you know, well on his way to getting the Living Legend. Let's assuming he does get Living Legend. Do you think anything else gets hit, or are we gonna let the Rune Blades kind of, you know, go rampant?
Ooh, this is so I hesitate to just speculate and say this is what's going to happen, because
Yeah.
LSS has they've though they are I think they for the most part do a good job of managing these things. Like they dealt with Duskblade right away, and they're still learning, but
Mm-hmm.
they are within up until April when we got that one, that was a botched announcement, I think, for sure. But beyond that, I think they've done a decent job. But where I'm going with this is they can be they've been clear to show that we can predict one thing and then they'll go in the complete opposite direction. You know, like
That's for sure.
and that's fine. Like I like to be surprised, and I like to, because usually I find too when LSS goes in the other direction, we expect like X, and then they go like, oh, you thought you were going to get that? Well, we're going to give you this, and it's going to be 10 times bigger than what you expected. Like, you know, Fab 2.0, all the hype leading into Jersey. Like, I have that expectation out of Jersey. They're good at keeping us on our toes and surprising us. So through that, I have a lot of predictions of, you know, they could deal with Scalata, they could deal with Sonata, they could deal with Revel, they could, you know, Starvo probably needs to be dealt with. There's a lot of things that I can say, well, if we want to deal with it, this is probably what we need to deal with. But I don't feel confident enough to say this is what LSS will do, because even the people with the most insight, even, you know, guys like Alpha Investments, they, you know, with certain things they've been shown that, well, no, they'll have one prediction and LSS goes completely in the opposite direction.
So what you're telling me is they're going to unban Seeds of Agony and no other changes. Okay.
You know what?
I wouldn't mind seeing what happens. It's like, you know, hey, let's just get all these heroes, living legend, sooner rather than later. But
if there's a time to do it, I think this is a meta that could handle it now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, between how powerful Viscera is, how powerful Starvo is, how stable Prism is.
They should have done it in April if they were going to do it, I think.
Oh, yeah. I think doing it a week out of Pro Tour would be terrible. Mm-hmm. And though they have hinted that we will get something. So if I have to make a prediction for the sake of making a prediction, or no, let me say this is my wish list. Starvo's, if he's not already living legended, they will retire him early.
Mm-hmm. Early retirement.
And at the minimum, Axe, Revel, and Runeblood. I personally, I don't hate Sonata and Scalata. Sonata is a good wholesome card where it's like it's got a huge ceiling, but it can whiff. And yes, you can, like, if you do have that, you know, you draw the nuts, you have that busted game where you know, make 12, 24 rune chance, and then you Scalata into Sonata for a perfect split. Yeah, that feels bad for the opponent. But on the flip side, like I've gone into a 12 card Sonata and hit maybe one card, and it can happen. And I think that within itself makes Sonata okay. And Scalata is such a cool modal card that enables such interesting game plans. Like I don't always play especially in you know, in like Prism matches and things like that. I look for weird ways to use Scalata, and I'll, you know, rattle bones things or do weird things to like play around auras. And I think if we axe Scalata, it hurts too many things to really make, like, if Scalata's gone, Viscerai's gone.
Yeah. It does feel that way. So I do agree. Something probably from Viscera should get axed. I think Revel might be the card, just because I mean I don't know. It just seems pretty wild, especially with creepers. You know, it can be pretty intense.
Well, you look at. I know we're going to talk about this a little more later, but that last game, in Krakow, Sonata, attack, Revel, then Scalata and Sonata again. Like, how busted is that?
Yeah, pretty wild. But you know, we will see what they do. You know, and then I mean, I swear to God, if Seeds gets unbanned, that's going to be absolutely wild. But We do have some listener questions for you, Adam. These listener questions come from the Discord, which is in the link tree for all the listeners out there. The buds, we got some great buds in there. Got to get you in there, Adam. I'll send you the invite right after this because the first question does come from your cohort on the combat chain. I don't know why he didn't just ask you this on his own, but he wanted me to ask you. Well, this is from Patrick Shaw. Is there any one hero or class you would remove completely from the game if you had the opportunity to do so?
I think sadly it's probably the easy choice is Runeblade. If you take that out, you probably still have a perfectly fine balanced game. So I don't want to see Runeblade go because even though it's busted, it is fun to play
and cool.
And if they can find the balance on it, I think it'll be fine. I appreciate the positions that split damage provide, and it makes for interesting problems for the opponent to try to deal with, and I don't want to see it go, but I think if there was one that you could remove and the game be probably better off for it right now, it's probably Runeblade.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. Though I'd love to see Illusionist get the boot, but that's all right.
I think Illusionist is fine because she keeps the game accountable in a way. Like
Definitely.
her and Mech do the same thing where they provide a different way to play the game, and when you focus on developing board state instead of just attacking it, you develop insurance for the late game, and of course you trade off your life as a resource to do that, and that can make I think the game's a little scary sometimes, or your opponent does get you in that bind where you can't get out of it, but it's just a different, unique way to play the game, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
And then I know a lot of people would also say Kano. But once again, I think Kano keeps the game accountable. Because if you're worried about,
right? When a Kano spikes a tournament, everybody's like, "What?" It's like is it Kano's time, and then they'll try to play it, and it's not. It's just the very best Kano players can do that. But I know what you mean.
But even at that, like, Kano is also like because where I think he holds the game accountable is like when you stop worrying about Kano and you start, you take those Kano hate cards out of your deck to tune your deck more for other things. That's when Kano then gets an opportunity to come in and wipe out a format like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then people all go, "Oh crap, I forgot about Kano," and then everybody jams their arcane barrier back in. The deck gets slightly weaker. People bring their, I don't know, are people running Irina's Prayer ever? A buddy of mine was actually playing around with Irina's Prayer in as a Runeblade hate and in Illusionist, and it's not terrible.
That seems pretty sweet. Next question comes from Andromeda. Hoping I'm pronouncing that right. What are the biggest issues with the power level in Blitz right now? And I think this is probably it's too fast, and this is probably all stuff we're going to go into, but it's fast, and they're not really designing cards specifically for Blitz, right? Outside of young heroes, right?
And when we got Crew, because I came really, I really started diving the game obviously right after Crew released, and when I was playing online, we were playing a lot of Blitz, and it was all Crew meta Blitz, and Blitz was a blast then. And it's funny because people complained about Blitz then, and they're like, "Oh, it's too fast, it's too swingy," and it's like we didn't know how good we had it at the time. Blitz, but I thought Blitz was, and I cut my teeth on Blitz. After playing kitchen table CC with the girlfriend and moving online, I didn't actually play my first real CC games probably until a few months after I found online play. It was all Blitz for a while. Yeah. When we first got Crew, that was the push. We had our first Blitz calling, and everything was Blitz focused then. for a while, like most people didn't know how to play CC. And I don't mean like I mean like from the sense of like what are the heuristics, like how do
Mm-hmm.
you use your life as a resource, because everybody was used to playing Blitz. But yeah, Blitz at the time was it was a blast because like there were these you would have these really grindy matches, and like it was all about incremental advantage, and that's what I'm hoping we get out of Commoner now, because I'm hoping
Mm-hmm.
Commoner won't be as powerful as Blitz is and as fast as Blitz is, though I'm hearing rumors that people are already doing 20 damage seizing
Oh
agony
my
turns, and
god.
it's like, no, that's not what Commoner is supposed to be.
No, yeah,
Uh,
get seeds out of there. uh
yeah, and that's the problem with Blitz right now is it's too fast, it's too powerful. Like we've got cards that are probably meant for CC, like Revel,
mm-hmm.
are plaguing Blitz. I actually, to go back to the idea of losing Scalata or Sonata, you know what? In Blitz, you probably could cut Sonata, and that would be okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. It's just you gotta like pump the brakes there a little bit. Living
Yeah.
like Gary, aka Mr. Viz, is a big Viserai player and friend of mine. Does Blitz have room for counter meta decks? Aka are there any gaps in the armor of the top performers that could be exploited? I feel like, I mean, it's tough to say. You see like something like Icelander, kind of
Yeah.
doing that a little bit, but it's we saw one Icelander in the top 8 of the calling.
But you know what? Icelander actually did really well throughout skirmish season.
That's true.
Um, yeah, Tyler Horse. This is my favorite example. Tyler Horsepool net decked an Icelander deck and went 9-0 with it.
Yeah, well,
Like just
he's on a different level, but yeah, this is pretty awesome.
and even I don't know if you have. I don't know how many people actually know about the Fighters Guild at this point, but even in the Monday night Fighters Guild events, there's been Icelanders that have just been tearing it up, making it to the semifinals because uh, she does a really good job of countering, and she's a lot more instant speed than I think a lot of people give her credit for.
Hmm.
I'm sure if we, because here's the part of the problem with the Flesh and Blood player base, and I myself am part of this problem. We're too reactive. We're too quick
Yeah,
to go.
just
Card to be
knee
strong.
jerk.
Card needs to be banned.
Yeah.
Format sucks, and we haven't as a player base learned to adapt to metas that well yet. Um, could we sleeve up a bunch of Ice Lexis and probably completely shut down Viserai? Maybe.
Yeah.
Uh, Icelander does it well. Unfortunately, Kano was a decent counter during Briar, but now like the game's so fast, Kano doesn't see enough of his deck. But there are, Oldhim's still really strong because Oldhim counters what Viscera is doing quite well.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are rooms for counters. There just aren't a lot of counters out there, and even despite having the counters, they're probably LSS needs to I think still step in. Gaps in armor, that's
Well, I guess he's kind of just saying, is there like a in a I guess a metaphorical
yeah.
sense. Yeah. I mean, like the I mean, Viscera is like it's like the frostbites seem to be, and like kind of shutting down things seem to be the way to go.
Yeah, or hand disruption, but like the
Hmm.
hand disruption has to be like oppressively disrupting.
Yeah.
Like I did have once again my buddy Andrew Palesky. He's found success with countering Viscera with Viscera in the sense of like running reeks of corruption and things like that just are like
Oh, very cool.
oppressively ripping cards out of hands. He was playing it. We're still him and I have hummed and hawed over how good this strategy is, and we've had conversations about it with people like Yuki and things like that, and we're not really certain where we stand on this, but like pummeling a reek of corruption in the right circumstance can be so crippling for
Yeah.
Viserai
Yeah.
that it's like, um, but I think the problem is it's probably just a little too slow and a little too clunky when Viserai has things like becomes and can essentially find sonatas out of the wazoo and make rune chants by the flick of a finger or whatever, like that yeah.
Yeah. That's I mean, it is tough because like you have to be able to keep up and do the hand disruption because I don't know, Viscera can just still have a crazy turn off of very little sometimes. It feels like now Dead Summer Art, friend of the show, has been on. Asks, should Blitz have access to a sideboard like outside of just armor? It goes on to mention it seems like decks are forced into doing their own thing instead of having tech cards to negate opposing decks and their play styles. And as from Go Again Gaming added on, should we look at something like best of 3?
I think if we start thinking, well, if the game stays as fast as it is currently, we probably can consider like making Blitz a best of 3 format. If that's I think that's where though. So LSS is in this position where they probably need to take a long, hard look at Blitz and go, okay, what do we want Blitz to be? If we want Blitz to purely be a 40 card, whatever, with the sideboard or with no sideboard, and the way armor is right now with the 11 slots, which if they want to do it that way, though now at this point you have UPF, Blitz, and Commoner that are very strikingly similar in the deck construction, and that makes me worried that then we maybe have like too many formats that feel similar. UPF, I guess, probably won't feel that similar, but actually, and I do like the fact that you can just take your Blitz deck and play UPF with it now. I digress, though. LSS needs to take a long, hard look at what they want Blitz to be and then react accordingly. If they want Commoner to be that 40 card thing now, and they can give, Blitz maybe room to have, up to 60 cards instead of, just like CC's up to 80 cards. And if they want to keep it a fast game and we can make it a best of 3 format, if that's what they decide they want Blitz to be, I'd be okay with that. But I think that's just ultimately LSS needs to as they develop new formats and as the game expands, they just need to clearly define what Blitz is going to be and then act accordingly to make it the best version of what it can be within what they've defined it to be.
Yeah. And a follow-up question to that is Blitz being taken too seriously as it is? Should we just kind of leave CC and limited formats to competitive play and keep Blitz as a more casual, fun, quick games, almost in the realm of the kitchen table?
And because going back to my nostalgia for crew era Blitz, that type of Blitz I actually really liked taking seriously, and I on that concept, I think high level Blitz is fine. But that's, I think, just comes back to LSS defining what they want Blitz to be. Now we do know, like, for the whole concept of like, making a good way for newbies to learn the game and things like that, I think there's two. One, we're going to get, PvE hopefully within the next year. And I think that's going to be a huge way that we're going to bring newbies in. And the other one that I think is very underrated, and I know this kind of goes away from Blitz, but Ira Welcome Deck. I think people forget about how good Ira Welcome Deck is to invite new players. Like the deck is both surprisingly simple and surprisingly complex at the same time. It teaches you the nuances of going wide versus going tall, doing attack reactions, defense reactions, using the arsenal strategically. It incorporates on hit triggers. It's got everything to like get that basic, but get the basics covered, but without being too complex. You don't have weird interactions like Prism or Creepers or weird things like that. And I think for newbies, that's probably one we should be leaning on more, is like, hey, I've got a welcome deck here. Or no, I've got 2 welcome decks here. Let's sit down and play a game and teach that way.
Yeah, and hopefully these classic battles cater to that as well. Though the price point is something worth considering for new players, but hopefully it is something that, if you split with a buddy, a bud, 25 and 25 for 2 hopefully somewhat competitive but simple decks, could be something going forward for newbies.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? Even though I just beat the topic to death, Welcome Deck is probably the most affordable
Yeah,
way to bring in new players too, because I think you can build the full deck for definitely less than $10. You can build 2 decks for less than $10, I think.
easily. Um, so, and then the final question here from the listener questions comes from the notorious BIG, Mr. Capolo. What is the most underrated hero in Blitz?
Um,
It's a tough one.
I think that is a tough one. I think still Icelander takes part of the merit here because
Mm-hmm.
Icelander is one that I don't think is really on people's radar, but we're seeing it, do really well. It did decent at Krakow, and we saw people take down skirmishes on it, and in that sense, it's I think it's got more going for it than people realize, and its ceiling is I think a lot higher than people respect. So for underrated decks to play right now at a high level, I think Icelander is still one of them.
Mm-hmm.
For underrated decks to play for fun value, it's definitely that at all. That is the most fun I've had playing. Like I've never had so much fun losing.
Oh yeah, and I know Capolo's gonna like that answer. Especially he's a big mech guy. But my most underrated hero, actually, is a little bit different. I would say Reinar on the play. Is my big underrated hero in Blitz right now because that's so scary.
You know what? That's actually a good point. I saw Reiner do fairly well in this skirmish season too, and one of my buddy Jeff that I mentioned being part of the inception of Combat Chain, he took Reiner to a finals of a skirmish easily. Like Reiner is, yeah, you're right, more powerful than people are giving it credit for.
Yeah, but that you got to win that die roll. But you got to kind of win a die roll with Reinar anyway, right? It's brute. That's what you're supposed to do. So those are the questions. But let's get into a little bit about the Blitz calling that we had. This is the first growth. What I'm going to start calling the growth era of Flesh and Blood Blitz calling this past weekend over in Europe. The meta breakdown was the following: Viscerai 33%. Then next, almost half, Oldham 18%. Then Kasai at 10%. Then we have like Kano at 7% and Reinar at 6%. And then the other 26% were a plethora of other decks below Reinar. Was this isn't really surprising, is it, Adam?
No. People are like, that's just part of the reality of the Flesh and Blood player base right now, is people are always trying to figure out what that best deck is, and they're looking to gravitate towards it. So to see 33% of people on Viscera, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. It is interesting, and it had a pretty good. Well, I don't have the numbers on day 2, but it had a good conversion rate in terms of getting into top 8. As the top 8 was 5 Viscerais, 1 Icelander, 1 Oldham, and 1 Kano. Is this something you would have expected if you were walking into this tournament?
I think this part goes back to talking about underrated heroes. I wouldn't have expected Icelander to top 8 the calling. And that's not to say that she's not capable of it. She's just wasn't that far on my radar. And then the other one, Kano, surprised me a little bit. I imagine whoever was on, or is it? You don't have the names handy?
I don't have the names up in front of me right now, but I can do it real quick. Actually,
yeah, because the Kano player, I'm trying to remember who the Kano player was. I think they're actually, if it was who I think it was, and it's a name I struggled to pronounce, so I'll wait till we get the official spelling. I haven't had a chance to see his list. I'll have to, and hopefully it goes up in the next couple of days on Fab TCG. I'm curious to see what he was doing to combat the Viscerais.
Yeah,
because that's the problem with Kano right now, is just Kano the average Kano isn't fast enough. You're only seeing like 10 cards out of your deck, and Kano Kano needs to like Kano can kill within the first turn or two, but only if he draws the nuts. And so yeah, to consistently kill with a Kano to the point where you top 8 when Viscera is wreaking havoc, that one surprised me a little bit.
Yeah,
Kill him though in the
I have the names. I don't know. I just have the names, but I don't know what they were playing. Well, we know Christian Hawk and Yuan Ji Lee, Jersey Boy. Um, uh, they were on Viserai. We had Sebastian Gola, Kevin Zankor, Martin Hechtenberg, Philip
that's
Van
the one.
Martin Hechtenberg. He was on
Yeah,
Kano.
he was the Kano player.
Gotcha. Um, and I guess like the I guess another big story out of this: two Americans flew over to this calling, both from New Jersey, uh, and they both debuted and one won it. Is New Jersey the hot spot for Flesh and Blood competitive play?
It certainly is one of them because isn't that where the
Yeah,
Hyperloopers are as well?
yeah. That's a lot of the guys in my local scene. Yeah, they're pretty good. I didn't realize how good the NJ scene was until I started going to LGS. LGSs and playing. I'm like, oh my god. I thought I was just terrible, but no. I mean, I'm pretty bad, but like I'm just getting spanked by some of the best players in the world.
Yeah, no, I think New Jersey's got a pretty strong scene.
Mm-hmm.
Um, one of the stronger ones in the States. I would say some of the like, though I don't know the entire US meta that well, like obviously everyone knows Florida's a very strong
Yeah.
hub. Texas is a very strong hub. I think New Jersey fits in there amongst those top hubs.
Yeah. I mean, I know there's a lot of talk about look out for Europe for the Pro Tour. You know, a lot of people saying that there's going to be a European winning the Pro Tour, but we will see. I think I mean North Americans here have definitely proven ourselves.
Oh, yeah, you know what? I I genuinely don't think you can predict who's going to take out the Pro Tour.
No, not at all.
Asia's very strong. The obviously the APAC region is very strong. Europe's very strong. North America's very strong. They're all throughout the world. There are pockets of people taking this game very seriously, and I think it's anybody's game.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how it turns out. But you mentioned a little bit earlier the Viscera mirror in the finals. Yuan Ji against, I think that was Christian Hawk against him. Um,
Yes,
and
it was.
it lasted about 1.5 turns. It was a Viscera mirror. Um, the question here is, does this hurt the perception of Blitz, or are we just kind of accepting that the Viscera is overpowered and needs to be dealt with, and then Blitz is in a better spot?
Yeah, it's it's too fast right now.
Yeah.
Blitz is I if there's one thing I feel like if LSS is hearing this and there's one thing I can stress is Blitz is not fun to play right now. It really comes down now. It's funny. We're finding ways to tech and make Viscerai better and better. Like we've started playing Hope Merchant's Hood recently. We saw Yuan
Yeah.
Ji use Hope Merchant's Hood after a Sonata. Like that's insane. Like pick up however many cards, shuffle 4, 5, 6 cards back into your deck, draw that many cards. Now you have non-attack actions and attack actions again. Like what kind of busted things can we do here? Uh, it, Blitz is not in a good place. And I think I really hope May 2nd that we use we just clean house. We I want May 2nd to just be I want us to look at Blitz and go, oh, where do we start here? Like a completely fresh slate.
Yeah.
I think that's what we need for Blitz. We're gonna get that with Commoner. And you know what? This might not be a bad time if we're trying to grow the game. This might not be a bad time to like clean slate everything and go. Okay, now the pro players and the experienced players are don't have that insane upper edge on the new players anymore, and everybody's trying to figure out the meta at the same time. it could be a good time to like help make the game a little more friendly to new players as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I would actually like to see, like, since they're recognizing Commoner as like a format, I would like to see some large scale events of Commoner. I mean, that would be great. For newer players who just start getting into it, say, oh, I could check out a large tournament as well, and not really have to really, empty the bank. Obviously, new players aren't going to be able to perform well as much, but it is quite the exhilarating feeling going to a large event like that. So, uh, I wonder if Commoner will eventually kind of take over Blitz in a way. But the real question is, what are they going to do? You're thinking that we should kind of clean house. What deck currently would be a healthy measure for being the top tier, right? Some people say, like, if Kasai was the actual best deck, probably Blitz is in a good spot. Do you
Yeah,
agree with something like that?
Because Kasai at least takes time to get her engine going. Like you you need to get the hits, you need to build up the coppers, you need to find the blood on her hands. You need all these things to come together. Now Kasai, once all these things come together, Kasai is redonkulous because now you can go down to a 0 card hand, have a blood on her hands and arsenal, uh, crack courage and swing the sword as many times as you have copper tokens. Uh, like that if if we if we slow down the meta too much, I guess I could see decks like Kasai just becoming too hard to beat. Um, but maybe that is where we need to think about going toward. I don't know.
Yeah.
I always come back to the thought that I'm not the game designer, and I'm like I always hope that LSS knows something more than I do, and that they secretly know the best way to balance things. But certainly you need to rein in Viscerai. That's the first step, and then I think part of it comes back to LSS needs to just decide what they want Blitz to be first and foremost. If they want it to be this, busted place where we can do crazy things with young heroes, and then we can fall back on Commoner when we want to play more reasonable games.
Mm-hmm.
As long as we have Commoner, then that's fine.
Yeah.
My part of my thought too, though, is as a benchmark, like I thinking back to the good old Blitz days, um, people used to complain about Ira being too busted, but Ira was, I think, a fine benchmark as well. The Ira and Dorinthia in her heyday. I think if we aimed for that, and then those decks, because in that time, you saw there was there was less rock paper scissors, but you saw like Dorinthia, Ira, Kano, all able to do strong things, but at the same time, the Viserais still could win some games. And yeah,
Yeah.
I guess I'm just nostalgic for the old days of Blitz. It's funny to already say that we had old Blitz days, and the game's only 2.5 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, it'll be interesting to see what they do. They did announce in Fab 2.0 that they're going to start using uh, the suspend list liberally. And now, for those of you who don't know what suspend means, a card that has been suspended is not legal for tournament play. And at the time it is suspended, a time frame of suspension will be indicated. And like some examples of that are like until the next banned and suspended announcement, until this time and this specific date, or until whatever hero they choose becomes living legend. Like they say they're going to use it pretty liberally. Do you think we see heavy duty suspensions first rather than bans? Because also one thing to note, I mean, I guess we do have a Blitz battle hardened at New Jersey, but outside of that, for a while it's CC ProQuest.
That's true. So, I mean, I mean, And luckily now that we have commoner, I know for my local meta, we're pushing to make the events commoner for the next little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And if a lot of places do that and we kind of go away from Blitz, you're right, it does give LSS time to just tinker with Blitz and find a healthy place for it, and then they can address things then. But yeah, with New Jersey battle hardened still, do they give Viserai one last time to just do busted things before they deal with him? Or I think if they want to do the heads up play, they deal with Viserai right away, and they let the battle hardened be fresh meta too. But
Yeah,
LSS is
definitely.
the one
Yeah.
behind the steering wheel, so we'll see what they decide.
Well, here, I mean, as you said before, they always do the opposite of what we think, and they're probably just going to make Starvo a young hero for
Errata him.
yeah.
We'll let him have a whole new run at it.
Yeah. Well, that's going to be the thing. The announcement is Starvo is now errata to be a young hero. Still the same life total. Have fun. So all that being said, the future of Blitz. Do you find it to be with the caveat of some kind of ban or suspension? Do you find health there, or are we going to rely on commoner to kind of really save that kind of segment of players?
I mean, I definitely see that there is potential to rein Blitz in, but then that
Mm-hmm.
just comes back to the whole argument or the whole discussion of what does
What?
LSS truly intend for Blitz to be.
Yeah.
And that's where I don't. For me, it's tough. I can see a few different futures for Blitz, and it's going to come down to how how LSS chooses to deal with it. Because I do genuinely like going back to Az's question about best of three or um, Dead Summer Arts asking about a sideboard in Blitz. I think those are cool options for Blitz. And if Blitz is a max deck of 60 cards now, where you present a 40 card deck, you've got 20 side card slots still with the young hero. That could be cool because right now Blitz has the potential of just being the more powerful version of Commoner, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like right now I think Blitz and Commoner might be a little too similar, so they could have an opportunity here to go, okay, we're going to do Commoner, which is going to be the bare bones basic version of the game. Blitz is going to be the middle pack version, and then CC is the full version.
Yeah, I can see that
Fun.
happening, and I think the May 3rd announcement is going to really tell us or give us a better
If
idea of what we can expect from Blitz in the future.
if Blitz would become that middle age pack, whatever format, do we then need to have like teenage heroes or like pubescent heroes or whatever? Like they're in that awkward stage of growth and they don't know how to.
Yeah. I
They
mean,
don't totally know how to. They have 30 health and I don't know.
yeah, they had and then they're just like, oh man, it's like acne cream, and they just need all that. That's something that LSS is probably looking at. I imagine. I just got off the phone with James White just today, and they're like, yeah, I think we're doing teenage adolescent heroes soon. But
They could do a supplemental set that's like going through high school or something like that.
well, yeah, well, that game that we had talked about, the Magic the Gathering, the game that shall but not be named, does have those unsets where they could get a little silly. I'm sure Flesh and Blood will.
That would be fun.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll get into that. Probably with the PVE. That's a great time to do that. And have like some supplemental PVE product. But yeah, Adam, this was a lot of fun. I'm so happy you came on. At the end of the show, I always like to give the guest a opportunity to plug all of your things. So go ahead.
So first off, thank you so much for having me. It was a blast to be on here with you. Yeah, I'm incredibly grateful. To plug my stuff, like I said earlier, I'm one half of the Combat Chain. We do the Combat Chain podcast. You can find us anywhere you stream podcasts, Apple Music, Spotify, whatever you're using. Deezer, I think, is one of them. We're all over the place. We're also on YouTube, youtube.com/The Combat Chain. And then Twitter is the other big place you can, Twitter and Discord. On Twitter, I am at FomTooleryTCG. We also have at The Combat Chain. And then we have our Discord, our Combat Chain Discord we're trying to grow. The link for that is available. If you do a little bit of clicking on YouTube and go to more recent episodes, the link is available there.
Awesome. And I'll pop all the relevant links in the show notes. And all of you buds can, subscribe to the YouTube if you aren't already. Hop in the Discord, the buds, this is all in the link tree below or wherever it is where you're listening or watching. Follow me on Twitter at FreshBudsPod, and then you can email the show, freshbudspod@gmail.com. And I always like to end the show talking about food, and I'm doing something a little bit new since I started the Patreon, where patrons can suggest a food topic for us to talk about. And Sean McDonald has asked he wants to talk about us to talk about nachos. What are some of the best nachos you've ever had, Adam?
Woof. Just like any loaded nachos, like you got, it's not just basic. Like you've got your meat and your onions and I don't know, you can throw some crazy things on there, beans and caveat, I'm not the most adventurous foodie, but
that's okay.
I try to get out there and like just a loaded nachos. And my big thing is nacho eating etiquette.
And what's that? You got make sure that you're not hogging all the toppings.
I think, and this is an idea that I wish was more widely out there. I think you should attack nachos from the outside in. Everybody goes for all the crappy chips first, get them all out of the way, and then everybody collectively gets to enjoy the nucleus.
That's interesting. Now, I do want to talk about that. That brings up an interesting point. I've noticed, and in my day job, I'm in a lot of bars, and a lot of bar food. Nachos are a great bar food. There have been, slightly in the past few years, a evolution in nachos. As opposed to just the plate with them piled up, you're starting to see them kind of come out on smaller like pans where all the nachos are spread out so that every single nacho gets a little bit of toppings. It's pretty genius, I think, because all of a sudden you're getting no naked nachos, which is like just that's what you want to begin with.
Yeah, naked nachos suck. I don't want I don't want just a chip. I paid for nachos. I paid for the toppings. I want them evenly distributed. I even like taking it like when I make nachos, I try to layer it. So I'll like a layer of chips and then a layer of toppings and then a layer like a nacho taco casserole almost. And
oh my God,
then you got it all spread throughout and it's good.
Oh my God, I'm definitely having nachos tonight, man. I don't know. Now,
Nice.
One more note on nachos. I've noticed I can go ham on tortilla chips. Like I'll open up a bag and go ham on tortilla chips. But if it is with the nachos and doesn't have the toppings, I'm like, what are these? But like I know that just on any random day, I would just eaten them out of the bag. It's like it's a weird psychological thing going on with nachos.
You got yourself all psyched up for like the toppings and stuff, and then it's just that chip's not good enough for you anymore.
Yeah, that's exactly it. But Adam, thanks again. With that, I think we're gonna say goodbye, and everybody, please have a great week.